Okay, everybody. Well, welcome to the Monday evening readings. So we are going to start. This is our first Monday reading for Comrade Hy Thurman's book. Oops, I'm blurring out my screen here. And it's Revolutionary Hillbilly: Notes from the Struggle on the Edge of the Rainbow. Before we get started with our Rainbow Coalition readings of business, we usually like to start with the Statement of Unity, which I will go ahead and read off. The preface to the Statement of Unity is the U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of the indigenous nations, breaking every treaty made to them, and confining them to reservations, concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the eagle sunk its claws into other nations, making war in Mexico and grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them or outright making them colonies or neo colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power in the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military interventions and robbing them of their right to self determination. As Huey P. Newton stated, quote unquote, we have two enemies to fight: racism and capitalism. Because the two, capitalism is primary, racism is a byproduct of capitalism, end quote. The working people of the world of every ethnicity or nationality face a common enemy that is destroying life on Earth. Our enemy is the small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live in a good and meaningful life: food, shelter, healthcare, education, freedom of oppression from the state, and peace with other nations. To obtain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. So that's the preface. And then I will go ahead and start with the actual statement of unity. The Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4, 1969, by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, the Young Patriots organization as well. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses had developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against this capitalist imperialist system in various ways around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the first Rainbow Coalition. This historic moment, this historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated that at the end of the day, we aren't engaged in a race struggle. He said, it's a class struggle, goddammit. By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist, imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule, and subsequently used the entire repressive force of the state, police, courts, jails, prisons, and intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We reformed the Rainbow Coalition on May 14, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the united front that will best serve our class liberation. By upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots organization, and all other Rainbow Coalition members, we establish our programmatic unity. The six disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist ruling class, represented by the Democratic and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their intent to keep us separated. Amen to that. Oops, and I just lost my screen. Give me just a second here. Do 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 do. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by both the Democratic and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Sanket Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we are intended to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win, all power to the people, boots on the ground. I love that. All right, so now that the statement of unity is read, let me just double check and make sure nobody else is trying to come into the room, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started on page 43 of Comrade High's book, and that is entitled Evolution of an Organizer. All right. With that being said, let us continue. In 1964, members of the Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, moved into Uptown to help the poor organize and control their community, calling themselves Jobs or Income Now Community Union, or JOIN. SDS was a student organization that had grown out of an older socialist organization, the League for Industrial Democracy. One SDS co-founder, Tom Hayden, believed that society could be changed by an interracial movement of the poor. He advocated that the poor should control their own lives and be educated on how to separate themselves from their oppressors. SDS recruited college students to live in poor communities, offering them knowledge and training in community organizing skills. Hayden, however, wrote in internal SDS reports a statement that was soon to be proven wrong about the poor not being capable of organizing for their own self-determination. Poor people know how they are victimized from every direction. The facts of life always breaks through to expose the distance between American ideals and personal realities. This kind of knowledge, however, is kept underdeveloped and unused because of another knowledge imposed on the poor, a keen sense of dependence on the oppressor. This is a source of universal fear which leads poor people to act and even think subserviently. Seeing themselves to blame for their situation, they rule out the possibility that they might be qualified to govern themselves and their organization. Besides fear, it is their sense of inadequacy and embarrassment which destroys the possibility of revolt. Hayden's statement is only partially true. There are those who fear the oppressor and submit to them, much like a prisoner is forced to be subservient to the prison guard. But still, this was not representative of me and many of the community organizers that I met in Uptown. It was as though Hayden and some of the students believed that poor people were under some kind of hypnotic spell by their oppressor. What people like Hayden failed to understand is that poor people are expendable to their oppressor, and his statement perpetuates the belief that the oppressor is their superior. In reality, the oppressed see the oppressor as being a lower form of human being and therefore not their superior, at least among the working and poor classes. But the oppressor can determine whether the poor can work and therefore feed themselves and their families. The force of the oppressors is a tremendous weight on the shoulders of the poor, especially the provider of the family. In many instances, there is no other alternative but to buckle under the oppressor's dictatorial conditions. This is called survival. But buckling under does not mean that the poor have accepted a position of servitude and shame. To the contrary, they only want to find an escape for their oppressor's control. The student effort was initially funded by the United Workers Union through a project called the Economic Research and Action Project, ERAP, which had identified Uptown as needing assistance in finding jobs. ERAP consisted of 10 projects in the United States, located in poor communities across the country. Through their research, they identified Uptown as having one of the highest unemployment rates in Chicago. Most of the students were Marxists and were surprised to learn that many of the Uptown poor were sympathetic to Marxist theory, but had never read or studied it. They did not know who Karl Marx was or the definition of socialism. The students discovered a contradiction. Although the capitalist system had indoctrinated the poor that communism and socialism was bad for them, It wasn't hard to convince community residents that the workers should have ownership of what they produced and control over their futures. I'm going to just pause right there real quick. This is right on the bottom of page 45 too. And I really think that in a weird way, that whole McCarthyism, that whole Red Scare of the 50s or whatever, translated and was bled into the 60s and 70s. And a lot of people had that stigma. And it's interesting to me that when I talk to older people that may not necessarily be revolutionaries, but were alive at that time, and I tell them about the certain things that I'm involved with and the certain things that I do, you can almost see that fear. And it's interesting how Comrade mentions that need for survival, because I'm always hit with the what if and how are you going to do this and we need this and we need that. And I'm like, well, why can't we do that on our own? A good example of that is, I believe it was last year or the year before. There was a indigenous brown man, I believe he was Honduran, who was a farm worker here in Oregon. And for those that don't understand, Oregon is #1 cash crop export are berries, all kinds of berries, boysenberry, huckleberry, blueberry, blackberry, Marionberry, any kind of berry grows native here to Oregon. The dirty little secret about that is it's picked by a lot of indigenous um, migrant farm workers, right? And so if you ever are in the Oregon Territory and you go to some of these migrant farms, you will notice that almost everybody has hands that are stained extremely blue or very dark, dark red. And that's because they don't even provide gloves for them for picking the berries, and that stains. And I remember this poor hermano had passed away for a heat stroke. Here in Oregon, when I moved here in the 90s, I never got above 90, 95. That was hot to us. Last year, we hit 120 due to climate change. And so this poor hermano had suffered heat stroke and he died out there in the fields. And I remember the people living in the tenement camps and living in the campos there, the braceros, they were so angry. They were so angry because they were like, we had been asking for just water. They weren't even asking for shade, man. They were just asking for water. And I remember all these Democratic lawmakers, they passed a bill and a resolution that water had to be provided. And then I remember thinking, that sounds all great on paper, but who's going to enforce that? Because a lot of these people, a lot of my people were undocumented and they're literally trying to survive. And it had not been for this hermano dying, I'm damn sure they wouldn't have said anything because they were trying to survive. So who's going to enforce that? Is it going to be OSHA? Uh, is it going to be some kind of other state organization that's going to go to the landowner, which a lot of them are corporate agricultural firms, and say, hey, your undocumented illegals need water? Nobody's going to do that. So then it's up to us to do that, right? And then I'm thinking, that might even sound good, but how am I going to go on to private land and address somebody and say, hey, my people need water, or am I just going to do it? So I totally understand what the comrade is saying here, and it's interesting that this is the conditions that people were dealing with in Uptown in the 60s, and in certain parts of the world, of the nation, it's still happening to this day. Um, yeah, it's incredible. Bottom of page 45. Another thing that convinced the students who came to the Southern white community was a directive from Black leaders, such as Stokely Carmichael from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, telling white revolutionaries to organize their own to support the Black freedom movement. White students have been able to go into the Deep South and participate in Freedom Summer and voter registration drives. Yet Black organizers couldn't show up in white communities and start knocking on doors. Therefore, white people should be going into their own communities to fight racism. Uptown was a logical location to organize due to widespread racism in the community. The students who came to Uptown listened to Black leaders and tried to put the organize your own mandate into practice. This was not true of all of the ERAP projects. Some simply sent white students into Black northern communities. The students rented a storefront in Uptown and offered their assistance in finding residents jobs. Soon they realized that unemployment was only one issue facing the poor in Uptown. There was also police brutality and harassment, welfare rights, inadequate housing, absentee landlords, inadequate city services such as garbage collection, street and sidewalk repair and cleaning, access to health care, and widespread poverty. The first contact between the students and the poor of Uptown was a lukewarm endeavor. Outsiders were often viewed with suspicion. Communication was difficult because of cultural and educational differences. My first encounter with a student organizer was quite confusing. He used a lot of rhetoric like power to the people, off the pigs, the streets belong to the people and not the pigs, and quotations from the Red Book by Chairman Mao Zedong. I was also told by one student that country music was just just people feeling sorry for themselves. Country music was a very important part of the Southern culture, and I considered the statement an insult. I do have to say something. I am a half-breed Mexican from Texas, and I hated country music because it was shoved down my throat. I fucking hated it. And then I remember, gosh, what was the name of this group? It was an old country group of the 70s and 80s. The Watchmen, the Highwaymen. It was Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson,
Yeah, highwayman.
the Highwaymen. There is a song there called America Remains. And then there's also a song called The Highwaymen, and it's from their first album called The Highwaymen. Those are my two favorite songs of all time, and they're very country. And when you listen to it, America Remains, it's basically each of the song singers, like Willie Nelson sings a part, Johnny Cash sings a part, and they play a role and it tells a story. My favorite part is Johnny Cash when he tells a story about being a Cherokee and they took his land. And this is a big country group that released this song, and the lyrics just paint this cool picture of what quote unquote this America was or you should have been or whatever, and it's not like that anymore. And it's very interesting. And that was my first time hearing the Highwaymen. And I mean, gosh, this was just what 2 or 3 years ago, and I mean they've been long gone now, right? And then with the exception of Willie Nelson, he's still around. And then the second song I heard was called The Highwaymen. And ever since then, like I hate to admit it, but I'm jamming out. I'm looking up Merle Haggard or whatever my wife has me listening to, like Earl Haggard or whatever. Some of that classic country is actually pretty dope in terms of like songwriting and just putting together a kind of interesting story. So no, I understand what the comrade's saying here. Page 47, continuing. For many students, this was the first contact with poor people. Some brought with them a great deal of middle class values and behavior, but some developed a deep compassion for the poor. Some were first generation college students from working class families and blended in better with the poor community residents. Still, there were a few who were naive and believed the old myth that the poor would not develop their own leadership. To some residents, this idea seemed to contradict why students were organizing in the community and attempting to develop an indigenous leadership. Because of the constant oppression from the Chicago city government and the police, residents were always in a state of rebellion, if not outright revolt. It was not until the 1960s that more residents began to organize community action groups that could not be controlled by the traditional Democratic Party, which historically kept their foot on the neck of organizations and individuals who advocated for social and economic change. SDS came to Uptown at a time that was ripe for community protests and played a very instrumental role in offering structure to residents who were ready to lead and organize their community. Many residents had been involved in coal mining confrontations, such as the Battle of Blair Mountain in Hazard County, Kentucky, during a union organizing drive that led to the murder of protesters at the hands of company thugs, police, and military. Many had knowledge of John Brown and Mother Jones. There was a long history of rebellion and friction between coal miners, as well as textile, agricultural, and domestic workers, with unscrupulous and greedy company owners such as Peabody Coal. Jack Junebug Boykin, Bobby McGinnis, Ralph Thurman, Tommy Lear, Sonny Broom, David Puckett, and others gravitated to join because of the organization's political rhetoric and the close proximity in age to the students. Boykin, McGinnis, Melier, Broom, and Puckett were street leaders and organizers. Thurman had been a leader of the Peacemakers, a street gang made up of mostly Southern white youth. The gang's history could be traced back to 1957, but the belief is it originated just after World War II. Some of the members of this gang would become known as the Goodfellows, and later several members were organized the Young Patriots. Boykin and McGinnis were well respected by the street population who considered them fair and good leaders. Joint students like Mike James, Patrick Sturgis, Bob Lawson, and others began hanging out with street guys, drinking in their bars, smoking weed, and engaged them on police brutality and other issues that affected their everyday lives. Jobs were a major issue for Join, but police brutality was the primary reason for these streetwise individuals to associate with Join, because several other friends had been murdered, beaten, and jailed by the cops. The alpha dog concept dominated the streets, and everyone understood who the leaders were. Some individuals were known as peacekeepers or peacemakers, and they were entrusted to solve problems and settle conflicts by getting people to work out their differences. There could be more than one leader depending on the group or individual which the individual would hang out with. Some leaders were identified as the toughest when it came to defending their honor or turf. Respect was mutual between Southerners and non Southerners because they all understood that they share the same oppressive conditions. The term street people came to identify the people who hung out on the street and developed a bond of brotherhood and sisterhood. Outsiders, such as students, could be an affiliate or sometimes engage in illegal activities and events, but would not be considered a full member of the group. One had to earn their place in the group and be representative of the culture, socioeconomic status, and sometimes the toughness of the individual. This structure made it easier to organize, recruit, and get support when it became necessary. Female students also found a more secure bond with the neighborhood women. Diane Fager, Nancy Hollander, Marilyn Katz, Nora Davis, and Pam Gray found favor with community residents, including Mary Hockenberry, Candace Hockenberry, Dovie Thurman, Dovie Coleman, Peggy Terry, and Kit Komatsu, a civil rights freedom writer. Through these friendships, Join organized several survival programs such as food co-ops, welfare unions, community theater, and many other programs that directly improved the lives of uptown residents. They also organized rent strikes, boycotts of businesses, and took over and managed a building in uptown. Their newspaper, The Firing Line, educated the community in addressing issues of liberation struggles such as women's rights, civil rights, and the anti-war movement, as well as news of liberation movements in developing countries. Firing Line, that's a cool sounding, that's a very interesting name for a newspaper. For those for those of us that work and maybe like in a trade skill or something like that, or medical profession or whatever, and we have unions, like I belong to one. I would highly recommend if your union ever has like historical classes or literature on their foundings or whatever, if you truly want to understand the class struggle and how it transcends racism, that's one of the very easiest ways to educate yourself, at least for me speaking. When I read up on the histories of unions, specifically mine, and how in the South and on the East Coast, like Comrade mentioned, people were being murdered, the coal miners were striking, so forth. I remember thinking, well, what's that demographic like down there? It's either poor white or poor black, and yet they were all probably doing the same thing because they were under the same living conditions. And that's one of the ways that I grew to understand the class struggle and how it literally transcends racism. And even to this day, I'll say, you know, I have more in common with a poor white person, a rancher, a handyman, whatever, just a poor person class than I do somebody who is a rich Chicano who just lost, you know, their marbles, forget where they come from. Jeff Bezos is a good example of it. I mean, it's sad that now we have to use Amazon for almost everything, right? And the dirty little secret is he gives free ICE accounts. I'm sorry, he gives free Amazon Prime accounts to ICE and the FBI and so forth. And the guy's he's lost his marbles. He shouldn't even have the last name Bezos. Go ahead, comrade Elder Andy. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and speaking about I lived in West Virginia and worked in the chemical industry as a union organizer, and also I trained to go in the mines. I never did, but I worked with a lot of coal miners back in the day. And there's a great movie called Matewan that tells the story of the organizing drives and how Mexican people were brought into West Virginia to break the strikes, as well as Black people. And instead of breaking the strikes, they joined the Union. And this story is well known in West Virginia. And there's a lot of Garcias, for instance, that I knew in West Virginia that speak with a real thick hillbilly accent. And this one guy Garcia, was one of the leading, members of the United Mine Workers Union in Logan County, West Virginia. So I recommend that as one of the best class conscious movies of all time. It's called Matewan, Matewan. It's great. It's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you for that, comrade. Thank you. Like you educated me on that. That's funny how they were brought in as scabs and then they turned their back on them and went towards the Union. It's funny, Cesar Chavez of the United Farm Workers. A lot of people see him, in terms of like a civil rights leader, but I really don't think people really understand how more effective he was in terms of union organizing, and being able to organize the masses. I mean, he was problematic in his own as well too, but yeah, the history of unions, if there's ever people that don't understand the class struggle, simply just research the history of the union movement in this country, and it just will exemplify the class struggle right there. Like Comrade Elder just said, Virginia, right? And then who was brought in to be breakers and so forth, and they ended up joining the union. It's very interesting to see that. And then in terms of solidarity, my wife actually just reminded me about this. St. Patrick's Day is coming up. There is a band of, or there was during the Mexican Revolution. So this is when Mexico was separating from Spain. There was a band of white Irish people that were living in some of the northern territories. I think it was like Arizona or New Mexico or something like that. And because of Catholicism and certain other intercultural family values, they really identified with the Mexican government. And so when the Mexican government was going to revolt against Spain, these comrade brothers actually took up arms. And the funny thing about Spaniards is they're very light skinned. There's a lot of Spaniards that are blue eyed and blonde haired. And so that these brothers who stood in solidarity with us wouldn't get shot, they actually had clovers put in their top hats. And if you go to Google Images and you type in Los San Patricios or Batallón de San Patricios, you can literally see pictures of these white Irish comrades that took up arms, sided with the indigenous Mexican people, with the Mexican government, who, if I'm not mistaken, was led by an indigenous leader at that time, and who wanted to separate from Spain and their colonization. And they were like, yeah, we stand with you guys. And they literally had to put something on them because as they're in war, people were fighting and shooting the other white people, and they didn't want to shoot these comrades because they actually stood in solidarity with us, and they're called Los San Patricios. And so on St. Patrick's Day, just for me, I always honor them by burning some sage for those brothers and sisters. Go ahead, Comrade High. What would you like to say, Comrade Elder?
Yeah, you were speaking about the field workers and the grapes and the strawberries and all that. We knew some people and actually worked with some groups that would go into a grocery store with the stickers and notes saying, this is not strawberry juice, or this is not grape juice, but this is field workers' blood.
Oh.
And I think we could still do that, with a lot of products that that's out there now that we're boycotting. Just send people in and just put stickers on this stuff and with a little note on it explaining why, and I think we need to get more proactive in that stuff too. I'm willing to. I mean, I'm thinking about doing that here, and I know a whole group of people here in Huntsville that would be willing to do that.
Yeah, amen to that, Comrade Elder. Just
Yeah.
recently in the news, there was something about meat packing plants that had a lot of exploited child labor. And this was just last week. There is a company, you can ask any brown beret, doesn't matter if they're national, autonomous, where they're from. If you mention the name Driscoll's, it's like holy water to the devil. That company is one of the largest fruit packing companies in the nation. And that company has a documented history of labor breaking, strike breaking, union busting, and they exploit their employees, mainly specifically brown indigenous employees. And a lot of the brown berets back in the 60s, if you look at some of the movements that they were doing, some of the protests they were doing, they would say no grapes, right? There's a famous Cesar Chavez poster that said no grapes, and that was the predecessor to a company that one of their relatives founded, Driscoll's. And even to this day, that company Driscoll's and all their different kinds of berries and fruits, it's a very horrible place to work in, for anybody, yet alone somebody from um, another place that's just trying to come and quote unquote live the American dream and so forth. And so I know a lot of the brown beret factions are trying to do something to bring that movement back, the whole boycott Driscoll's, because it never changed. I don't know if people just forgot about it or whatever, but if you don't know about something, you can't really blame the people. I remember I was at one of those fancy Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or whatever, and I saw there was a whole aisle of Driscoll products, and I remember thinking, man, people don't know, and this is Oregon, this is the birthplace of every native berry, and here my people are picking it, and it's that same company, and it's here in Whole Foods, and so you're right, Comrade Elder. It'd be nice to either have a protest outside or a sticker, even just that, even just a sticker just explaining something like, do you understand what you're buying into? They're union busters. They exploit women and children, specifically little girls. I personally know of a couple of migrant camps here that the reason why they use little girls is because their fingers are so small they could get in between certain berries that have thorns. A lot of people don't realize that blueberries and blackberries, if you ever had blueberries or blackberries on your property, it is hellacious to get rid of because they're very thorny and viney. And so little hands go and pick it. How disgusting is that? But if people don't know that, how can we hold people accountable? We have to keep the masses educated. So you're exactly right, Comrade Elder High, and this is the perfect time to do something like that. 100%. All right, my good people, I'm going to go ahead and continue reading page 50 in the bottom. The history of the Chicago police has always been one of corruptions. Ain't that the truth? The cops in Uptown were from the 20th district, and in 1959, they were involved in the famous Summerdale scandal that led to the conviction of 8 officers and the removal of Police Commissioner Timothy O'Connor. After this humiliation, it changed its name to the Foster Avenue District, the street where it was located. In 1958, a 20th district detective named Frank Ferracci stopped Richard Morrison, a well-known burglar, and forced him to be his personal burglar. Morrison would fill a shopping list for Ferracci and his cop buddies for personal use and resale. But the heist came to an end when another cop who was unaware of the scheme arrested Morrison with stolen merchandise. After hearing Morrison's story, the cop was given immunity for turning state's evidence against Ferracci and his band of thieves. After much embarrassment, Mayor Richard J. Daley brought in police reformer Orlando Winfield Wilson as superintendent of the police. Wilson had served as chief of police in Fullerton, California, and Wichita, Kansas, and was the author of several books on policing and police techniques. He was tasked with reorganizing the Chicago Police Department to get out from the stigma as being corrupt and controlled by politicians, crime syndicates, and city officials. Wilson taught that the police had little control over social causes such as poverty and neglect, and discouraged officers from getting personally involved with residents. However, police could repress and control crime through aggressive tactics, such as preventative mobile patrols. He believed that using police vehicles had a better chance of solving, deterring, and preventing crime as well as arresting lawbreakers because cops would still be able to observe, talk to, and interact with community residents. Wilson did not foresee cops remaining in their vehicles for most of their shift and consequently becoming isolated from the public. There had always been a disrespect by the police toward the poor and minority communities due to segregation, in addition to class differences. There was already little trust between locals and the police, and due to cops being transferred in and out of the communities, officers saw no need in being friends with community residents they did not know or respect. Soon cops began to apply more force and found it more convenient to transport arrestees to the local police station. Both cops and residents began to view each other as enemies. If Wilson wanted to deter crime, his plan failed miserably. Due to all cops having more mobility, it became easier to transfer them to all parts of the city. This became evident when bad cops were being transferred in and out of poor communities. Many of the officers were misfits, had little to no respect for the neighborhood they were patrolling, and some had a bad reputation for being psychotic and unstable. These communities would be a perfect place to assign these undesirable cops. It was a perfect plan because the poor were considered an undesirable population. Damn, they were expendable. It did not take long for Wilson to become a memory after his departure from Chicago. Daley used Wilson's great reforms to praise Chicago's finest. The mayor again appointed his machine pawns to increase his wrath on those who opposed him and to carry out his policies of oppression and oppressing the poor. Police brutality, graft, and murder by the cops increased. Again, it was business as usual. Patronage increased. Syndicate ties were once again being restored. The new police force became the old, same police force. In the late 1960s and through the 70s, the cops had a safe house in the 47th Democratic Precinct, west of Uptown, where they would take prostitutes and other women to be sexually victimized. The highest ranking police officer that I knew to use the location was a police lieutenant, and the person allowing its use was a Democratic precinct captain. An incident of cops raping a young woman there had been documented in the book Uptown Poor Whites in Chicago, after a woman came to the join office and reported the crime to the staff. I have witnessed cops whistling and making sexual remarks to women, even when their children and husbands were present. My God. Oh, I know I would have been shot back then. By looking at Mayor Daley's behavior toward the poor, one could come to the conclusion that he didn't care corruption and oppression occurred. With his statement that there are, quote unquote, no slums in Chicago, he had attempted to make slums invisible to those who had no contact with the poor in his city. Many believed his lies, and yet he needed the poor neighborhoods to compile crime statistics in order to request state and federal funds for the police and other city programs. The police also used this as a tool to aggravate tensions between gangs and poor residents, encouraging violence between them. His police gang was a major contributor to violence, rape, extortion, and murder in poor communities. My first of many encounters with the Chicago police was during my second week in Uptown in March 1967. While walking down Sunnyside Avenue, two uniformed cops stopped me, handcuffed me, and put me in the back of their backseat of their patrol car, accusing me of burglarizing apartments in the neighborhood. I felt as though I was reliving the false accusations against me in my hometown by the local cops. I explained that I had no idea what they were talking about. And then one of them asked if I knew anyone who had been committing burglaries in the neighborhood. I informed them that I did not. One of the cops asked for my identification, and I could only show my social security card. He asked to see my selective service card. I informed him that I was only 17 and could not register until I was 18. He then asked me if I wanted to buy an ID card. When I did not buy the ID card, he became very angry and said, "Just another fucking hillbilly. All you hillbillies are stupid and we don't want you here. Just go back where you came from and fuck your mother, sister, brother, dog, or whoever you people fuck down there. Now get the fuck out of my car. If I see you again, I won't be so nice." Jesus, and that was nice. At that point, one cop pulled me from the car, pushed my face to the ground, and placed his foot on the side of my head while the other cop uncuffed me, still cursing me. It was this behavior that convinced me that I could never trust a Chicago cop. And I'm going to stop right there because I think, on top of the class struggle, one thing that unfortunately can also unite us is police brutality. I just recently saw gosh, I think it was a TikTok video or something like that of this family, Southern family or whatever, and they had kind of a nice spread, a nice ranch or whatever. And so to get to their house, you had to come down a dirt road. And so they had a dog running around barking or whatever. And this cop just got out and shot the dog. The dog was not being aggressive whatsoever. And the young ladies that were there, I mean, they were just fit to be tied. And he ran back into his car, locked himself in and called for backup. And I don't know why he didn't even shoot them. And I remember thinking, damn, like me being a Chicano from Texas, like that's normal. In some of the bigger ranchitos down there, you pull up, you have to drive down long driveways, whatever. People would have either pigs or chickens or a dog running around, and as long as they weren't aggressive, everything was cool. You just had to be nice, and then the animal would trust you. And this cop just shot this poor dog in front of them. And of course, me being a lover of dogs, I immediately told my wife, "Nah, I'd go down." And she was like, "Yeah, I'd probably go down with you." Like it's unfortunate that even then they had police brutality, and even now we still have police brutality. And it's unfortunate to say that that might actually be something that would also unite us, because I can guarantee that poor family of young girls. I think they were even working their land or whatever they were doing something that if there was a protest on police brutality, no matter what color, no matter what age or creed, they would probably be there as well too. And it sucks because with the class struggle, you would think that the state would back off a little bit. You would think that they would understand that the more we keep oppressing the people, the more slipping through our fingers and actually reuniting them. You would think that, but obviously not. Comrade Elder Andy, you still have your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in here because Chicago is still Chicago. And one of the things that's happening next month will be a mayoral election. The guy who's the front runner right now is a cop lover. His wife's a cop. He has two sons who are cops. This guy's name is Paul Vallis. He's been around for years, and he works as an international privatizer. He's been to Chile, he's been to Haiti, he went to New Orleans after Katrina. What he does is he swoops in and he organizes in the business community to privatize everything that has been the result of a disaster, like in New Orleans. He instituted privatizing the public schools. He did the same thing in Chile. I went to a meeting the other night with these Chilean students, and the cop brutality in Chile against the people, these kids took like 200 wounds from rubber bullets, most of them aimed at the eyes. They were trained by Israeli forces and by US forces in those kinds of tactics. Chicago cops back in the day used to be real heavy, and a lot of them couldn't run very much. But now you see these guys, they're all buff and they look like Proud Boy cops or something. And they're more vicious. They're bringing in Ukrainians to Chicago, and God knows what they're going to do with them. But it ain't going to be pretty. And so we are facing cops when in a situation where there's fewer and fewer jobs in the poor communities of Chicago. The homelessness is rampant. And instead of backing off the cops, they're going to increase the oppression because of the fact they have no way to control these people, and these people have no means of subsistence. So they're going to be real hard. And he wants to go back to stop and frisk, and he's running the same kind of campaign as the New York mayor, who's also a cop. So the cops are not lightening up at all. And under the neoliberal agenda, it's going to get intense.
And I think that's exactly it, Comrade Elder, is that neoliberal agenda. Like painted like it's supposed to be a good thing, right? But it freaking isn't. And it's just going to magnify the oppressiveness of the force that the state uses that we call the police. It's just going to magnify that repressiveness. And it's gosh, it's unfortunate, but you know, I'm hopeful that what'll happen is a lot of the comrades will see that. I just recently saw in Ohio or something like that at a drag queen event at like some club or something like that. It wasn't even like at a school or library, like it was like out, like at a club somewhere on the outskirts of town that these Proud Boys or neo-Nazi or whatever, they were chanting, and they actually had to set up a perimeter around this club. And I remember thinking how foolish, because these Nazis were doing us, you know, how Hitler salute, but they were all wearing red and black, which for those of us that understand the socialist movement in Spain, right? During gosh, I forgot the name of that president's movement. There was that whole no pasaran, and it was red and black. And I remember thinking, gosh, you idiots are so contradicting yourselves. You don't even realize what you're doing. And then I remember seeing that these poor comrades were getting harassed at their own venue, their own private place, and then the cops came in and were agitating the comrades. They were like saying, well, you guys shouldn't have planned this. They weren't hurting anybody, so they were literally siding with white supremacy. And so, yeah, neoliberalism is, to me, almost as stank and as poisonous as white supremacy and as the police state. It just paints itself in a different light, right? Oh, Comrade Zombie, go ahead, Comrade.
So the group you're talking about is a new group that's making their presence known in the United States. It's called Blutmann. It means blood group. And
Oh, is that why
yeah,
they were wearing the
yeah,
red?
yes, that's why they wear the red. There, it's Blutmann. And the second thing, I always tell my comrades, if you want to know whose side the cops are on at protests, watch who they have their back to.
Very true. 100% true.
Yes,
100%
watch who
true.
they have their backs to. And it is almost always the white supremacy groups. Almost always, because they feel safe turning their back on them because they are them.
Because they are the exactly
Yes.
right, Comrade.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. The sister has spoken. All right. I'm going to go ahead and continue on page 55 here. In June of 1967, a woman called the joint office and reported that she was having a dispute with her landlord on Kenmore Avenue. She said he was in the process of throwing their clothes into the street and would not allow her back into the building because she was going to inform his wife that he was making sexual advances toward her. My gosh. When Mike James, Sonny Neville, and I arrived, the tenant, landlord, and two of his relatives were having a heated argument. She claimed that she had paid her rent, but he wanted her out before she can talk with his wife. The tenant said she called the cops, who only drove by and did not stop. The landlord ordered us off his property and asked his relatives to call the cops. This time the cops did stop, heard both sides, and sided with the landlord. Of fucking course. Even though the tenant had paid rent with a receipt. The cops claimed that because she did not have a lease, the landlord can legally evict her. We informed the landlord that a joint lawyer would represent her if she chose to file harassment charges, which made him angry and came toward us. Mike James was the closest, so he extended his arm to stop the landlord. The cops did not like joint, and that gave them the opportunity to arrest us three on assault and disorderly charges, and they hauled us off to the Somerdale police station. He came at them. Anyways, in August, we were found guilty on the disorderly conduct charge, while the assault charge was dismissed. The Chicago police were always keeping an eye on organizations that worked with street guys, the homeless, or those who were determined to be undesirables. And I'm just going to stop right here, because exactly what Comrade Zombie said. I want to say, gosh, this has been 2 or 3 years ago. In passing, I had just happened to walk and stumble upon a protest in downtown Oregon, in downtown Portland, where I work, where I was working at the time, and they were trying to pass a bill that allowed no cause evictions. So almost like this, didn't matter if you had a lease or whatever, it was just no cause, the landlord or the company, the property management company could just say, yeah, something came out, you need to be out or whatever. And there was a dispute within like city council and the legal courts and the local city courts on how much time to give somebody. Okay, they got a lease or not. They're going month to month. Can you give them 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Like that was it. Not 2 years, 3 years. Like it was just days, like 30, 60, 90. 120 wasn't even on the table. And so they were arguing about that. And there was a small protest of like rent equality folk, if for lack of a better way to describe them. And I remember I caught the eye of an ACLU legal observer because I had been in contact with this comrade to get me and my unit trained as legal observers. And so we made eye contact and I was noticing exactly what Comrade Zombie said. All the cops were there and they had their backs turned with the landowners, the landlords, and the local city council, and everybody was on their back. And we weren't talking like a big, massive crowd. Like I think there was like maybe 5 or 10 people, but there was a long line of cops, like 2 or 3 city blocks worth of cops. And I remember talking to the ACLU legal observer, and I remember she was like, "Yeah, it's because there's so many of them here that's why I'm here because we're not the violent ones. But we can't trust them." And then literally after that all happened, then y'all heard in the news about what was happening with the Black Lives Matter movement and how the police, the pigs here, were literally gassing people and harassing people until the federal pigs came and were just kidnapping people, right? Comrade, hi, Comrade Elder, how did you want to say something, Comrade?
Yeah, at one of the protests we had here to trying to get the Confederate, statues removed. There were, I don't know, maybe 100 of us there, and then across the street, there are about 10, white supremacists over there, and one of them was even wearing a Confederate flag. And, they were yelling and everything. And, the cops went over to them and gave them high fives
Oh,
right in front of us. They didn't care if we saw them or not, and they were looking for every reason to arrest us. So that's just the way they are. They don't care anymore. And if, like we said in Uptown, if there were any good cops in Uptown, they must have been sitting at a desk somewhere because we never saw them, So anyway, just want to tell you that, even like here, that's the way it is here.
Man, Sister Anna, go ahead, Comrade. You had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And just to add on to what Honorary Conrad Elder is saying, we really need to look into the type of training that these so-called peace officers, who's really hired to protect property instead of protect people, are receiving. And it just comes down to if they only have a week to take such classes such as diversity and inclusion classes, it tells you a lot of how much emphasis is given to them looking out or knowing and understanding the community that they are actually working for. For one, I don't believe in the law enforcement system because, number one, there's a lot of issues with the candidates that are selected. And then you have to look at who's selecting these candidates to be recruited as peace officers. And again, it just shows that the communities don't have no involvement whatsoever, where there needs to be not a citizen, but a community review board in place. Else we're going to continue having more George Floyd cases, Michael Brown, Tamar Rice, cases, because of the fact you have these officers who really don't care. That is about having an attitude, control, divide, and conquer, over by suppressing the residents or the people in the community. And though we see the horror that's taken place in our brother Kai Thurman book of the way police brutality was back then, is still relevant today. And it's something that shouldn't be a surprise, although it is shocking to say. But this is what goes on, where back then it wasn't film, and today is a choice up to the police to film by turning off thousands of dollars camera, where it should be a federal law infraction for the camera not to be on, but it's still going to come down to such cases that are going to continue on until, people actually get involved and either get rid of the police department, get rid of these officers that's on the street, or be subjected to the same thing that we are reading right now and that we are seeing on the news.
No, I agree, sister. It's interesting. The union that I had belonged to is one of those unions that transcends like nonprofits, not-for-profits, and some like local, like county agencies, like the public county or state, like public health agencies or whatever. And so I remember the guy that was my union steward, my shop steward, he was trying to convince me into taking the classes to become a union steward, shop steward, right? And I remember, talking to him, and I was like, I don't know if that's for me. I just kind of want to do my own thing. And I got to know this comrade. This comrade actually sat on one of those citizens review boards that you're talking about. And so there is a group that just got funded here, and I forgot what they're called. I think they're called the street responders of Portland, or Portland street responders, but they have to be LCSWs or MSWs, so licensed clinical social workers or masters of social work. And if a 911 call in the city of Portland happens to come through with like suicidal ideation or somebody with a gun or whatever, and they're a person of color, or something that leads the 911 operator to believe it's more mental health than to send a cop, they're supposed to send this team of people to go out, and they have bulletproof vests, and they, to be honest, they do look like cops, but they don't have guns or anything. It's supposed to, the whole idea of this team is to talk people down, to give them the help they need, to carry Narcan on them and so forth, right? Well, that unit of people is city workers. They don't really get paid a whole much, even though they're LCSWs and MSWs. So they had joined our union. And in joining our union, this guy that I was talking to, who's also part of the Citizens Review Board, was saying, they're getting so much really good training, trauma-informed care, how to speak to people with different languages, de-escalation. We thought it was a good idea for PPB, Portland Police Bureau, to go through that training. And guess who fought it? It wasn't city council, it was the police unions. They fought it. And so then on the union front, they couldn't make it come to fruition. So then he was like, well, fuck this. I'm going to take it to the Citizens Review Board. And then it got squashed by the mayor. So
Wow.
the police state, I agree 100% with you, comrade, but be honest, I have zero hope in the police state. It's so
Right.
repressive.
Yeah.
It is so repressive. Granted immunity,
it's the same old thing. And as a child, like I had said previously, during the Sunday reads, I remember seeing my father being brutalized by the police, where there was time when I was the age of 7, I say, well, will this weekend be the weekend that I would no longer have a dad? Because I seen my father being brutalized with billy clubs, where they would gang up on my dad and beat him up, because he was a very loud community activist. And one thing he had a passion for is the advocating for the children in our neighborhood, in which he really fought hard as one activist to make sure that there is an after-school program. When my father saw things that was wrong in the community, he would curse people out and really at times get undignified. And, they would just bully my dad and they would, beat him up where, I even heard my father scream in pain for being ganged up by them. So that's like not only traumatized me as a child, but it just came to the point where I have no trust whatsoever in any police helping or, being a trusted individual there to uphold the law when they felt that they was above the law. Even times where, there'd be teenage kids in the building where I used to live at, which was projects. They would just be minding their business, just talking among themselves, not loud. But then they in the lobby in front of the building, and you have these undercover cops that will come and harass them, throw these little small white bag substance on the floor and say, okay, we busting you up for drugs. I mean, it was an on and on thing where it was just so crazy and out of control. And, and these are the things that I will always remember and even see today, not in the area where I'm at now, because it's more of a military setting where I'm at, transitional, and rarely you'll see a cop. Matter of fact, you don't see cops in the neighborhood walking the so-called beat. They only come when somebody call and there's an emergency. But I'm sure if you go to one of these, project areas, Willing, you definitely see this type of attitude still continue on to today.
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. Comrade Zombie, you had your hand up, comrade?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that we need to think about all these things we're talking about right now. When, excuse me, when it comes to preparing our groups and our affiliates for what they are going to deal with, because literally the cops are literally no holds barred. They don't care anymore. It's no limits, no holds barred. We all saw what they did to Tyree Nichols. We saw what they did to George Floyd. We see it every day. And I think we need to remember, and it's kind of a disgusting, sobering thought that they are doing this when they know they are being recorded. They know they're being recorded and they're doing it anyway.
Right.
Because there's they do not care anymore. I was absolutely appalled this morning, and, trigger warning to anybody who does it. On Twitter this morning, there were several videos released from it's an account on Twitter called Chuds of TikTok, and they released a bunch of videos that were released in Ohio in relation to the East Cleveland Police Department, not Cleveland, but East Cleveland Police Department. 11 officers are being charged with various charges because of things that they've seen in these videos and injuries that they've inflicted on people. And Lobo, I'm not kidding. I'm like, you know me, dude. I was a trauma nurse for 18 years. And I watched these videos and was literally traumatized by what I saw. I mean, police officers ganging up on someone who's on the ground, one person on the ground, and 6 of them are kicking him and punching him. And then afterwards, they look at each other and start high-fiving and going, motherfucker got his ass kicked. That was a good ass kicking. A person running away down the street, and the cop literally purposefully hit them with their car, and then called it in to dispatch and said, I need units out here. He just hit my car. He hit my car. We have a comrade in Portland who has a level 4 bulletproof helmet that has a 1.5 inch deep intrusion in the side of the helmet because a cop shot a gas canister right at his head. If he had
I
not had
believe
that,
it. There was something
Yeah.
that happened all the time.
if he had not had that helmet on, he would be dead right now.
Ah,
So we have to have a realistic view. We have to have a grasp on the reality of what they're doing to get our people ready. We do. They are 100% out of control. And it's everywhere.
I agree 100%, Comrade Zombie. We have to have a come to Jesus. And one of the things I like about, especially organizations like the Second Rainbow Coalition, is we still have elders like Comrade Andy and Comrade High, who, I mean, it's here in the book. They dealt with this before. So like, what could we get from them to learn? Because that's one of the things as a revolutionary, you always got to learn. Like, I did not like wearing 30 pounds of AR 500 vest, but the first
Right.
time I felt those rubber bullets, and I'm a big dude. If y'all haven't seen me, I'm over 300 pounds. And that took my air out. It literally, I could not breathe. It felt like
Yep.
like punches. And I was like, no, hell no. So you're
Yep.
right, comrade. I think
Yeah.
we had to prepare, but it sucks because it's never changed. So whatever
Right.
advice or tactics we can grab from the elders, run with it all day.
60 years.
Yeah.
60 years.
Yeah.
And we are, let me add on to what you said. We are so blessed to still have the elders to
100%.
advise us, and let us know what they saw and what things worked for them and what things didn't work.
Mhm.
So that's a huge blessing.
Definitely. Comrade Andy, Comrade Elder, you
Yeah,
had your hand up.
yeah. I really appreciate comrades, backing up all the things that we know happening all over the country, and that they kill 1,000 people a year, and they've done that on a regular. And it's like, that says volumes. If you compare it to any other country in the world, it's just astronomical numbers of people being brutalized by the police. Now, I would say one thing in regards to training them, or, sensitizing them or something to the situation. I have a friend, or even older than me, who's was a leader in the Puerto Rican community. And when the cops killed one of the Puerto Rican youngsters in Chicago in 1966, everybody poured out into the street. And this man was one of the leaders and champions. And they brought him to the table and said, what do you want? What do you want? And he said, it's not what I want, what the community wants. We want the height lowered for the qualification to become police officers, because most of our Puerto Rican guys are too short to qualify as police officers. So we want the height requirement lowered. So after a while of protesting, Mayor Davis said, okay, we'll lower the height. And he said, man, you know what happened? Them Puerto Rican cops, they kicked our ass worse than the white cops. I mean, there is a feature about what is the job of a cop. The cop's job is to protect the investment of private property owners. And in Chicago, you're talking billions and billions of dollars of real estate. And that's their only job. and they're trying to invest in the communities that they haven't invested in them since Martin Luther King was killed, and they people burned down the whole west side of Chicago. It hasn't been built back since. It's been 50 years. They haven't laid any new substantive development in there, but now they are, because they're getting rid of the people. They're getting rid of the people. The land remains, and the people that they haven't got rid of yet, the poorest people in Chicago, are going to catch hell. And it's coming to every poor community in the country, because and in the world, actually. They're doing the same thing in Nairobi, in Africa. In Nairobi, Kenya, they use the same damn model that Chicago uses, and they have the same damn personalities at the helm. People like Bill Clinton, Rahm Emanuel. It is their agenda to get rid of us. So we come armed with that. We start telling these millions of people who are getting screwed what time it is, and they compare their experience in the street with what we're telling them, and they know goddamn well we're telling the truth.
100%, Comrade Elder, 100%. Sister Anna, you have your hand up, sister. Go ahead.
Yes, to add on to what Sister Zombie, as well as honorary brother Andy and High is saying, we have to look at how much money is actually being given to the department, or to law enforcement. And I guarantee you, if you go to a city hall meeting or a town meeting, there are, that segment where you see that all these fundings are going to the police department. We need to go after the, police department when it's coming to these, to the police officer insurance, get them where it hurts, because the fact, no matter how much money that we entrust for the department to do their job, like what brother Andy has said, it's about property. And I guarantee that someone will be arrested and sentenced to jail with the worst type of sentence for knocking down a street light than for someone actually hurting or trying to murder somebody. And that's how it is here. Matter of fact, in Norfolk, Virginia, we are trying to decide, the cities, decide what chief will be our ideal chief for the city, because we have no chief and we're about to elect one. And instead of knowing the name and the background record, let alone, you can't go based on the record alone, but you have to go with how they interact with the community. Now the way you choose or elect a chief is by the alphabet letters, where their names are not there, where you can do more of your own individual research, but see that there's Officer A, Officer B, and Officer C running for the position. And I'm like, what is that telling? That's not saying nothing. We can't look at the merits of these individuals who have been in the department. We have to really look at their records. And one thing that is not connected is that there are officers who can have a record as long and extensive of brutality, like Mayor Daley in Chicago, which Brother High have explained here. And you think Donald Trump was worse? Oh my God, that man was like 1,000 times worse than Donald Trump. You will not know his record because of the fact it's not being disclosed to the community at all. But by the community having access to this, we will have a better hand in how the officers are being selected, and if they deem as being a service in the community. Or else, again, we're going to fall into the same situation where in Nairobi, Africa, not only they have their choice of weapons, but one of their choice of weapons is constantly using a whip against people. Now here, we're going to have robots to replace the short staff of the police officer. We're going to be controlled by those officers who are out of line, who has no regards for life, who have no training or want to be trained or care about de-escalating a situation where it's going to result into more Blacks and brown and poor people being killed by the hands of terrorist thugs with a badge and a gun.
Exactly right. That is exactly right, comrade sister. It's unfortunate, but yeah, that's what it's looking like it's coming to. I'm hopeful that for those of us that are active in unions, that it's kind of a weird thing because you would think the police union would be against like drones, and I even saw like this damn robotic dog that could go and do bomb sniffing and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you would think you would want personnel in there so that they could pay the dues of the union, right? So then if you would think like that's just feasible, and then for those of us that are active in our own trade skill unions or whatever, how could we hold them accountable union and union if we can't do that on the civilian level? Like it's just weird, but you bring up some really good points.
Mhm. Yeah, police evidence.
Comrade Zombie, you had your hand up. Comrade, go ahead.
Yeah, just one quick little statistic because I love me some statistics. In answer to something Sister Anna said, and something for anybody who's listening to keep in mind, the military budget, the military budget for the United States last year, and well, the proposed budget for this year is $850 billion. The total budget for policing in the United States last year was $300 billion.
See, I told you.
It is almost
Yeah.
half. It is almost half of a budget that is meant to defend this country from other countries,
See?
from foreign invasion. 300 billion dollars for policing in the United States. And that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. I told you, go to a city hall meeting and see what they discuss and see how much the large amount of money is being invested right back in the police department. And now we have banks that's failing and people can't get their money because if it's not going to the funeral business, it's definitely going to the prisons and it's definitely going to these out of order cops.
They are setting up an army to control their own citizens, to
Yep.
control and oppress their own citizens.
100%.
It is a
100%.
domestic army. It is a domestic army.
Brother Annie said the capitalist demands protection.
That's why they need such a, like, he's exactly right. God, I love having these elders. He's exactly right. That's why they have to have these large budgets, is because imagine what the original Rainbow Coalition did in the 60s with just Chicago. Imagine if the second Rainbow Coalition can do that in just 4 or 5 other bigger cities: Chicago, Los Angeles, Nueva York, Miami. Imagine if you went to a national level. That is why they have to have these big budgets, because weaponry costs money and they have to oppress us. It's just
Right.
funny to me that what they claim they do, lowering crime and all that. Hell, give me half of that. Hell, don't even a million, 500,000, shit, even just 10 or 15 grand. I know at least 5 people on my hand right now that I could call up. 3 of them that are either ex-cons, ex-felons, homies in the hood that I would put on my payroll, and 2 others that have like a mental health background, and we could get shit done. There's a crime. Okay,
Absolutely.
well, let's go and investigate. Oh, he broke into a car. Why? He's cold. Shit. Okay, let's get him some housing. Let's get this and that.
Right.
And then we could talk to the owner of the car that was broken into and say, yeah, he broke into it. Sucks for you, but this is why he did that. You don't really want to press charges, do you? But homie needs to do something for your windows. Like maybe he could take out your trash or something. We'll get shit done. Like that's why
Right.
I'm a big proponent for defund and abolish, because
Mhm,
imagine the breakfast programs, imagine
mhm.
the housing 300 billions.
And I just,
There's other
Mhm.
nations that don't even have that on their whole economic
Right,
system for
right.
everything combined.
And Capitan Lobo, for that 300 billion, they solve 2% of all crimes.
That's
and
exactly
that's
it.
it.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
2%.
And you know
2%.
what, sister and brother, you know what? And now you see the police officer with CPR kids, and I'm like, what the hell are they doing that for? Like, they're gonna really pull it out and really save a life here. If anything, they're gonna cover it up. Instead, what they could do is pay for that crooked ass American Heart Association that's overcharging people to learn how to be community lay personnel into knowing the chain of survival by being our own brothers and sister keeper, to know these vital lifetime skills and probably be there as a immediate, crisis responders to help situation for those who having a mental episode or someone who's in need, to jumpstart their heart, than to give all this money to pay for these equipment, which are not really being used. It's being wasted just like those cameras, And I just want to say that my dad, he was born and raised in Chicago, and I'm glad that to know that my paternal grandmother and her family has sent my father out of that whole state and sent him to a boarding school, because if he would have stayed there, I don't think he would have made it. But then again, he went to school, and you won't believe the place. But can you guess? Can you guess the state he went to school to?
I'm gonna say something rural that you wouldn't imagine, like, I don't know, Montana, Wyoming, or something.
Go ahead.
That's what I'm gonna think.
That-
Somewhere in Montana or Wyoming. Am I right?
No,
Okay.
Lexington, Mississippi.
Oh God, that's probably even worse. That's deep down south.
He went to a Christian boarding school in Lexington, Mississippi. But you know what? The one who had the biggest mouth, you could say, and for the people, was my mother, who was, born and raised in Harlem, New York. And she was a firecracker with her mouth, where the whole state wanted her to leave and don't come back. I just want to add that in.
Thank you, comrade. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and continue. We're on page 56 in the middle of the page there. Paragraph starts with the Chicago police. The Chicago police were always keeping an eye on organizations that worked with street guys, the homeless, or those who were determined to be undesirables. There was an organization active in the area called the Friendship House, which was sponsored by Reverend George Morey from the United Presbyterian Church. And Reverend Morey would give the street guys a place to get off the street, play pool, play their musical instruments, or just sit and talk. He would also try to find jobs for them. The center he ran, often visited by the community relations officer from the Somerdale police station. Reverend Morey was trying to find me a job when the community relations officer came in and said that he was interested in helping me and that he knew a place that had an opening. He would check it out and see me the next day. Morey told me that he didn't trust the cops. A reverend didn't trust the cops. What does that tell you? But that, but that there weren't many jobs available, encouraging me to check it out. He feared that the cops would want something in return because it was not in their nature to help the people of Poor Town, to help the poor people. We agreed that since I did not have a job, I should accept the offer. The cop arranged for an interview with Central Watch at the Wells Fargo company, which monitors security alarms for business and residential customers. The interviewer said that he did not have an open position, but was creating one because he and the sergeant were friends. God, that's so crooked already, Sonny. I was given a polygraph test, but no questions of significance were asked, just name, age, address, and birthday. I started to work the next day from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The job consisted of sitting at a workstation and reporting any breach in a security system, such as when someone had entered a business or residence without disarming the alarm. In the end, I never had the opportunity to actually carry my duties because I received no training, and in any case, someone else monitored my station. All I did was sit at my station and sleep most of the time. One morning, about 3 weeks of being on the job, and I was ending my shift, the sergeant and another man in a suit picked me up in an unmarked police car and wanted to take me to breakfast. The suited man said that I was doing an excellent job and that he had talked to his boss and they had big plans for me. Then he got to why they wanted to talk with me. He said that I was an intelligent guy and that they wanted to provide a better life for me. All I had to do was work for them. Informant. All I had to do was work for them. They wanted me to keep them informed about any plans by the peacemakers, Joint, SDS, Reverend Maury, and any other radical organizations that I came in contact with. I had knots in my stomach and felt like throwing up. They wanted me to be an informant against the only friends that I had. I was one of the guys. I wanted to improve my conditions, but I could not turn against my people. I had been harassed by cops in my hometown and Chicago and had seen police brutality against the people of Uptown. I told them that I would not accept their offer. Of course, they told me how ungrateful I was and said that I need not return to work. I often wondered if the cops and the FBI had arrangements with other businesses to lure people into becoming informants. At that moment, I made a commitment to better myself by working against the oppressive capitalist system and serve the people. I became more involved in the community. Page 59, marching on Summerdale. The sun is setting in the sky, the color of red like the blood of dying. They've beaten us down till we're almost crying. Gotta do something or die trying. Guy's been scared too long, scared of the blue lights flashing wrong. Been slapped enough to bleed to dawn, getting tougher and singing this song. They call us punks and jerks and bums, call us dumb, stumper, jumpers, hillbillies, tell us to go back to where we come from. If we've done nothing, they make up a tale. We ain't got nothing to make our bail. That's why we are marching on Summerdale. In August of 1966, around 250 former peacemakers and members of Join and community residents, including Native Americans and Latinos, marched on Summerdale Police Station demanding an end to police brutality and murder by the police. The protesters specifically called for the firing of a notorious bad cop named Sam Joseph, who was known for his dislike of the street guys and his brutal tactics on community residents, as well as the creation of a civilian review board to monitor police behavior. The cops countered the march by recruiting a group called the Dover Boys, who were from the west side of Uptown and who were better off economically with family ties to the Democratic Party. They and other friends of the cops taunted the protesters. Cops would look the other way while the Dovers raced their cars through Uptown and Lake Michigan's lakefront. When the protesters arrived at the Summerdale station, they were greeted by Detective Sam Joseph, who informed them that he was going to kill every fucking one of you. Bob Lawson was threatened again several days later by the same detective who told him, "We're going to march all over your head." Detective Joseph had a very checkered history of mistreating people. He was also the most decorated cop in Chicago. One would think that with all his commendations that he would be commanding his own district or given a cushy office downtown. So why was he stuck in Uptown? Because cops, particularly those that were misfits and psychotic, were placed in poor communities in Chicago. Who in Daley's administration cared if the poor were beaten? God. Joseph had overstepped his boundaries in 1965 when he severely beat a middle-class kid. Charges were brought up against him, and the Internal Investigations Division, IID, recommended he be suspended for 30 days. But he was untouchable. In response, several politicians called for the IID itself to be investigated. The civilian review board that the protesters were demanding never materialized, but the beatings, arrests, and harassment continued. Sam Joseph became more blatant and brutal, especially against those who were identified as instigators on the march by the Chicago Police Gang Intelligence Unit. whose duties were to identify and investigate gang members, while the Red Squad would monitor those individuals and groups that were considered a threat to Chicago or the federal government and might have unpatriotic beliefs. In September, as a retaliation for the Foster Avenue March, narcotics agents from the Chicago Police Department and the state of Illinois raided the Joint office and the office of the United Presbyterian Church after they had broken in and planted the drugs. Two Joint organizers, Reverend George Morey and two bystanders, were arrested and charged with possession of drugs. God, they charged the Reverend. How low can you go, man? Both offices were almost totally destroyed. Several months later, all charges were dropped. The night following the raid, the Chicago cops killed Danny Williams, brother of an active Goodfellow. Many stories have been told about the killing, but the one most repeated is that Williams was known as a fighter with a quick temper. On this particular day, he was stopped by two cops who had history with him and disliked him. An argument ensued and he began to run. The cops shot him in the back and killed him. Some stories have it that he was told to leave by the cops and then they shot him. Regardless of which story is true, Joint student organizer Bob Lawson states, and I quote, even though Williams was a rough guy, the cops could have wounded him, and he did not deserve to die like that. A week later, about 25 community residents at Goodfellows held a memorial service for Williams at Broadway and Wilson at the site of the murder. As usual, the cops surrounded the gathering and broke up the service based on anti-loitering law that makes it illegal for more than 3 individuals to occupy the same location for over 15 minutes without a permit. The cops were afraid that if the crowd was to grow any bigger, they would not be able to control them, giving the protesters an opportunity to draw more residents to the protest. 2 weeks later, Michael Ancanter, a young Native American who attended the march, was severely beaten by the cops. In particular, he was known to be on Detective Joseph's enemy list. This song from Uptown Poor Whites in Chicago by my brother Ralph Thurman tells what happened to Michael. Love these songs with stories. Check this out. It was late one night. The cops were riding around looking for someone to stomp into the ground. Just when they passed, a little boy threw a glass. They stopped, but they did not hear a sound. They remembered Michael from some time ago. He was fast asleep, so he didn't know. 2 police came inside and turned on all the lights. They grabbed him and said, "Let's go." As they opened the door that led into the street, they shoved him and he fell to his feet. When he turned around, they knocked him to the ground. They hit him till his head began to bleed. By this time, another policeman joined the fun. He tried to get up, but he was nearly done. I could tell he was in pain, but they kicked him just the same. Michael pleaded, but they kept on with their fun. Still then, they beat him with their clubs and fists and feet. Michael was helpless as he lay there on the street. Plenty of people were on hand, but no one would give a hand, as poor Michael just lay there in the street. I wonder what the world's coming to. You can't even trust the man in blue. I'm sure the man above didn't mean this to be love. If he didn't, then it's not right for me and you. Damn. In September of 1966, the Goodfellows and Joint organizers marched on Chicago City Hall demanding still an end to police brutality and the Citizens Review Board to investigate and stop the Somerdale Police District from, quote unquote, framing, beating, and killing people they don't like, end quote. Also, they wanted city funds so that all people in Uptown could have decent apartments and low rents, and welfare recipients to get more money and be treated like human beings. Our flyer stated, Mayor Daley and other big shots don't know what it's like to live in Uptown. They don't even care. So why should they boss us around and make it hard on us? End quote. Again, their demands fell on deaf ears, and the cops retaliated with their abusive victimization on the people. Early in 1967, the Goodfellows and Joint organized a police watch committee modeled after the Black Panthers police patrols in Oakland, California. Their purpose was to go out into the community to monitor and document suspicious and illegal activities by the police. Joint activists Nancy Hollander, Rob Lawson, and Ralph Thurman would be the first to conduct a police patrol. On the first night, they witnessed 2 cops beating an unarmed man. And Lawson asked the cops why they were doing this and was given no explanation and told to stay out of this, end quote. After the cops discovered that they were being photographed, they confiscated a camera from Hollander. The activists had agreed that if anyone attempted to confiscate the camera, Thurman would run with it to a secure location. Hollander would then give up an old Brownie camera instead. The cops destroyed the film and the camera, believing that they were getting rid of the evidence. Lawson protested the action and was arrested and later released. The photos were used to prove police brutality by printing them on flyers and in the Joy newspaper, the firing line. Awesome. And what a great way to end. Again, it's a blessing from the ancestors that we have these revolutionary comrade elders. That was a badass tactic. You run this way, they're going to chase you, give up the camera, and it's going to be a falsie, but I got the real one. Like, I mean, there's things that we can learn. I know tactics change, especially with technology. I'm not for certain political organizations, but the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, as an organization of a bunch of lawyers, sometimes it can be a little bougie in terms of political action, but in terms of police brutality, they are all for filming and documenting police brutality. And according to your state, if you go to Google Play or to the iTunes store, they have apps for different states. And if you type in ACLU Virginia, ACLU Oregon, ACLU Indiana, whatever state you're in, some of these apps have this thing that if you're stopped by the police and you tap on the app, whether the camera is locked or off, it'll record until you deactivate the app again. Not only will it record audio and video and save it to your phone, it uploads it in real time as long as you have a cell signal to the ACLU mainframe. And I think it's kept for like 6 or 7 years, so that if you are shot, unfortunately, or detained, and you need to review the film and they get it off of your camera, which was a tactic used here by Portland Police Bureau, if you don't have a password, highly get one, because I literally saw cops say, okay, here's your phone, open your eyes, and then there you go, they unlock your phone and they have everything in there, whether that's legal or not. You can access the footage off of the mainframes by a request to ACLU, and then you can sue them. I think, so that's the tactic. Hearing what the comrade elder did, that's a tactic, and it's unfortunate, but we have to think about stuff like that. Like Comrade Sister Zombie said, with certain organizations, we have to have a come to Jesus that, something may happen to where either we are provoked or we must do something revolutionary in terms of standing our ground. Violence should always be the last resort, but even in how you do that should be very tactical and also very sensitive as well too. I know for myself, whenever I go to police brutality marches and so forth, I try to be very cautious of other people for whatever reason here in Portland, maybe because they like protesting or whatever, they take elders and they take children. And so I have to be very cautious of that and how I present myself and what I do. If I, start whipping around a baton or something or trying to go after a cop or running from, I don't want a smaller person or another to be, caught in the crossfire, so to speak. So it's something to be cognizant of. Comrade Elder Andy, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying really brings to mind and something that High really represented, that a lot of the lefties around that time did not. See, he was in a community serving the people of his community. I was a student in Ohio. I came to Chicago with a bunch of radical SDS people. They came in and they did stuff that Fred Hampton identified before he passed. He said, what these kids are doing is it might as well be agents. They're running amok in our city. They don't have any roots here. They're tearing stuff up. They broke a cop's neck. When then they all went back home, these were all white SDS kids. When they went back home, they killed Fred Hampton. You see what I'm saying? He predicted that would happen. He knew damn well that these fools, these lefty nutcases, thought they were going to be more militant than the Panthers, more militant than the Young Patriots. And they came in here and the result was chaos. The basically the whole left movement in the country was and chaos when Fred Hampton was murdered. You know, I was fortunate I was in Cuba at the time, but what I came back to was just complete liquidation and disheveled, a complete mess. That's because people who weren't being responsible. See, we got responsible people in our organization now, like Sister Zombie and Sister Anna, who are even professional, emergency responders. And we understand as a collective that we're in serious, deep shit. And we cannot afford to let into our midst irresponsible people that just want to get their yayas out. We have families, we have children, we have grandchildren, and they're all in jeopardy. So we cannot allow ourselves to be run by some kind of leftist nonsense. That's all I want to say.
Wise words, Comrade Elder. Thank you for that. Wise words indeed. Sister Zombie, you had your hand up, Comrade. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, first of all, I have a huge smile on my face. Elder Andy, it's an honor that you would even mention me. Thank you for that. I wanted to tie into what you said, Capitan Lobo, about the ACLU app. There is also a specialized app for iPhones. I can't say the name of that lady that you talked to on your iPhone because it will activate mine, but it is, you say that name and then you say, I'm being pulled over, and it literally will turn on your rear facing camera. It will put your phone on do not disturb, because we all know that you don't want your phone to ring and freak out the cop and have him, quote, accidentally shoot you. So it puts your phone on do not disturb. It turns on your rear facing camera. It records audio and video, and it sends it automatically in live time to any person that you designate in your phone for it to be sent to. So I use it if I'm stopping, like if I see someone being pulled over, if I see a young Black man or a young, indigenous or, BIPOC person being pulled over, I stop and film. And I use that, and it gets sent automatically to a couple people that I have designated. And then that way it's not on my phone for anyone to erase. Another one is, and I'm very sorry, I cannot remember the name of it, but I think that you could look it up online. It is a program where you can literally, if you get pulled over, you can use this app and you will have an attorney on the phone with you live to handle the interaction with the cop.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
And I'm not positive with the attorney app where all it's available right now, but I would encourage people to look it up online. It's a free service that is being provided. I don't think it's through the National Guild of Lawyers, but it may be. I may be wrong about that, but I would look up maybe like, I don't know, Live Attorney app or Instant Attorney app or something. And it will be on there. And it is meant to, you literally get this attorney on the phone and hold your phone up to the cop, and the attorney talks to them for you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So those are out there, and I would encourage everyone to take advantage of them.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Comrade. I'm definitely going to add that to my repertoire. It's kind of sad to say, but I'm in such a habit, like whenever I'm in my truck or my car or whatever, and I'm heading out to do an errand or whatever, the first thing I do is bring up all my social media, put it in the background. That way, if I am pulled over, I can live stream, right? Although that may not even help. We all saw what happened to Brother Philandro Castillo on Facebook Live. He was literally killed. But still, at least there's some kind of video evidence. And then I do the ACLU legal app, and I'll definitely research those other ones. I am an Android user, so that's why I mentioned the ACLU user app, but I know all about SRI with Apple. And Sister Anna, go ahead, sister. Oh, you're muted, sister. Go for it.
Hey, Sister Anna, you're muted.
You're still
Oh,
on mute,
thank
sister.
you.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much for passing along this information, Sister Zombie, because this is information I didn't know, and is very useful for us to even post for our comrades or supporters to know and be aware of. And I don't know on your telephone, but I know on mine, which I have an Android just like yours, brother, that if you go to your trash bin, there's a code or a password that you have to put in. Mine is a 4 numerical password, which will prevent anyone from trying to delete your videos, even if you go live, because you will have
That's right.
officers who will take evidence which they're not supposed to tamper with, and they will try to erase it by throwing your live or your video in the garbage. So to prevent that, they need to know a code, and the only person that will have that code is you. So that's another thing that some people may not know that is useful, but is very good to have such services and apps like that that will protect you. Because now it seems like most of the equipments that we have is giving us the opportunity where we can bring the jurors to us with based on these evidence that's available for our credible evidence, which can be trigger or tamper with by those who's supposed to uphold the law and represent the law. But then again, those are these individuals who try to be above the law. And there was one more thing that I was going to add, but I just forgot. But I just find that these are so valuable information to pass on, and even the post, to protect those who can be in a vulnerable situation. And like you, Sister Zombie, when I see a situation going on where somebody is being detained, or I'm there and I have my camera going, and if I have to be that voice, I will be that voice to make sure that that person is protected. And now police officers are trying to intimidate those who film them, where now there's laws and there's bills and action being taken where they trying to stop people from using a camera and turning it into a crime, or trying to bully people and say that you need to stay away from being in the street when you could be on the sidewalk, where even by you wearing police gear or wearing protective gear, they saying that it's illegal. And I don't know what's going on in other states, but I know here they are stopping people from video taping the police. And right now, they lost their mind, where if you try to sue the city or the police, it's going to be impossible. So they stopping all our rights to protect and defend ourselves when we can't even trust law enforcement to do this.
Yeah, you're exactly right, sister. It's like Comrade Elder Andy said, it's the capitalists, they need their repressive force. I put something in the chat, and it's from the ILRC, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, and it's a card designed for our indigenous brothers and sisters that may be undocumented or whatever, whether they get pulled over or an ICE agent comes to their house or whatever, what they can or cannot say, what they should or should not say, and it's free. I ordered some, and I think they gave me like 1,000 or 2,000. I still have some left over. Like, it's a very wonderful resource. And with that being said, Comrade Elder High Thurman has his hand up. Go ahead, Comrade.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic, I'm honored, and I'm honored with all you folks, you're just great, And I wanted to say that if Andy is working with when he's working with a newsletter, maybe we can somehow put some of this information in the newsletter so we can get it out to everybody, because I think this is really important, because even this conversation here, I missed a lot, and I'd love to have this information, from all of you, so I can put it out there. And I think this is just another great weapon we can use. Also Zombie, I have a group that wants to join Guardian Rebellion I need to talk to you about, but yeah, this is just outstanding. I love this stuff. And I wish we had this back in the day, would have helped us a lot. But it's an honor. It's an honor that everybody's going to read my book and talk about it, because I never expected that, so thank you.
I'm still waiting on an autograph, Comrade High, Elder Comrade High. I'm still waiting on an autograph. Okay.
I got mine in real
So-
time. I got mine in real time.
Well, I had Brother Andy art piece, and it's hanging on my refrigerator until I can get the appropriate
Nice.
frame.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
I'm gonna
Thank you,
definitely
sir.
take a picture, and I'm gonna put it in our chat group. And I just want to read what Zombie sister Zombie has said. And she said, and no face ID or fingerprint ID to open your phone. And I think, we should have more application, security application for the user to prevent people from illegally using our phone.
Yeah.
Well, and Capitan Lobo, if you and I can talk, and you can give me like if it's okay with Elder Andy, you can give me the name of that app that you know about. And Elder Andy, I would be more than happy to write up a small article. My the people in my group will tell you that I drill into their heads about phone safety and things like that. If you are out on the street and you are going to any sort of action whatsoever, I drill it into their heads, because there's so many wrong ideas and so much incorrect information out there. Like people will tell you, oh, just put your phone on airplane mode and they can't track you. They can't ping your phone where you are, which is absolutely untrue. So I would be more than happy to write up something with some of those tips in it and
Absolutely.
get it to you for the newsletter. There's enough of them out there. We could probably do it in a little bit in each version of the newsletter.
Yes, I appreciate that. I think it'd be useful for everybody who's out there. And well, let me say one other thing about the newsletter. It was due to come out, but we don't have enough to put in it to justify doing that. It can wait a little while. It's not rushed, but I want everybody to observe throughout all the books that we'll be reading. High's book, and then the Aaron Dixon's book. You'll notice that there's everybody had a press back in the day, and I'm not sure how many of our groups have their own presses, but the Second Rainbow Coalition press could be gleaning articles from every group, which would represent the whole and give people more and more of a feel for what we're actually attempting. And I would say that particularly when you read some of the reflections of Black Panthers, like in Aaron Dixon's book, everybody took the press out. Everybody, that was their assignment. You had thousands and thousands of newspapers flooding into communities. That's how the people were oriented. That became the press will become the people's press. When they say that this press represents us, these programs that y'all are calling for, that's exactly what we want. So whether it's a firing line, the Black Panther Party Press, Palante, or the Young Lords Press, or whatever, we need these presses because in many ways, not having public control of these technologies are ultimately in the hands of the class enemy. and we can't be totally reliant on them to get out our word, to tell our stories. They distort it, they twist it, they bury it, they defile it. So
Yes.
we are the ones, and we may have to go back to mimeographing like Hi and I used to do in some messy ass little basement. But it's got to come out. Words got to go out.
I
Right.
agree, 100%. Comrade Zombie, what were you gonna say, Comrade?
So first of all, let me tell Comrade High and Comrade Andy that I'm not much younger than them. So I remember newspapers, and I remember having, your newspaper delivered to your front step and stuff. But I am also a huge fan of technology. And I think that one of the things that Second Rainbow Coalition needs to probably consider and start to look into is a well-designed, eye-catching website. We've got Second Rainbow Coalition on Facebook, but I
Right.
think a website would be phenomenal. And all of these stories that you compile, Elder Andy, could come out in print so that we can hand them out to people at actions, but also be compiled on that website. We could have an education section, and we could have a news section, and all different kinds of things. We have some very good web designer contacts that we could talk to if it's something that the coalition
Yes.
board would want to consider. But I think we have to do this in a way that we use every bit of good old fashioned stuff and good old new stuff to reach everybody. From
Absolutely. You're
from
music to my ears.
yes, from 20 somethings to 60 somethings. We have to reach
Amen.
everybody and do it in a way that they are familiar and comfortable with. Yeah.
I just
exactly
one
right.
little point about that is that Sister Zombie about that, and case in point, Hi and Kwame going out tour, and they got an interview with Teen Vogue.
Yes, yes.
And it's like,
Yeah.
holy crap, this
Never-
is going to go beyond.
Never in my lifetime. I have 3 daughters. Never in my lifetime did I think that that Teen Vogue would become a political magazine. I'm like, what? What do you mean
Right?
they're interviewing political figures? But that's phenomenal. That is so great. It's that audience thing. You put the information wherever you got to put it to get to the audience that you need to get it to.
And it was in the Washington Post.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice.
I just want to also add is also good where anybody can help out by being that point, that outreach or that a point person to help those who are in distress or, who are illegally being kidnapped or, brutalized by law enforcement. And it's good if we can propose or just make a draft and just put the information also online where it can reach out to many other Facebook platforms as well as profiles. So this way we can have the information, because I just want to briefly said there was a emergency, a mental emergency situation in which I was able to get the number of the person who was having a mental breakdown. And to make a long story short, I had called 911 here, in which they had told me, you need to contact a non-emergency hotline. And it involved this person who wanted to commit suicide. So you try to figure that out. Why would I call the non-emergency line when it's an emergency phone, emergency situation? So I was directed to the operator where this person was at. And being that I only had his phone number, the operator had informed me, we need to have the person's physical address so we can reach out to them. And I asked the I asked the operator, 911, well, can you ping the phone? The operator said, no, we can't do that. And to end the conversation, they said they cannot do anything unless they have a physical address, and they will have the police to go out there. And they end the conversation with me by saying, you have a good day. So yes, Sister Zombie, we need a list of resources. We need to know the information. We need to know the laws that's out there, because in addition to our mission in policing the police, also we have to be the resource for resources, because
Yes.
we can't rely on those emergency paid individuals to just only blow hot air up our asses and see something that's so sensitive, so personal, and so serious as attempted suicide to be referred to a non-emergency number.
But we've got a lot of people who prefer to not be in the public part of this fight. So we've got enough people who can sit behind the scenes and look up those things, national suicide hotline numbers, and they can compile. I've got a couple people in mind right now. As a matter of fact, I can have them start compiling a list for things that are national, and then maybe we can reach out to our comrades in different areas and get resources for specific areas also, like
Yes,
North,
let's do that.
Midwest, whatever. But yeah, I have a couple of bulldogs in mind that will not stop until they find the information I ask them to find. So I'll set them on.
Comrade Zombie and Comrade Sister Anna, how would y'all feel about this if, now this may be a big if, but what if we had like a venue and a place and time for Second Rainbow Coalition where all the comrades could get together, and maybe we can have a workshop on resources? What do we do for folks that have suicide? What would y'all think about that?
Would
I'm
love
for
it.
it.
Like a conference, right?
Yes.
Well, let me tell you something. That's not my idea. Again, shout out to the elders. That was Comrade Hyde Thurman's idea. And I think we
Absolutely.
capitalize on that.
We were laughing
Definitely.
the other night. We were laughing the other night, Lobo, because a lot of people in my group, specifically, would really like to get together and meet each other in person. A lot of us do stuff together in our areas, but not, with people that might be from, the East Coast people don't know the West Coast people in person. And we were trying to figure out where a nice central location was. And the only thing we could come up with was Nebraska. And we all said no.
I'm not too sure if I'm keen on going to Nebraska, comrade. You can send me
Yeah.
some corn from there though. I'll eat that all day long.
We all said, well, no, never mind then.
We can do it virtually. And
Well,
Brother
but
Andy, he said that, the online services, it has to happen. I'm not reading exactly what he said, but it has to happen, guys. And I feel that, is a good idea. Thank you, Brother Hi, for allowing us to read this information, to actually come together and discuss this, because I remember one person said that we need to have less talk and do more work. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because in order to organize, you have to talk about situations that impact our community.
Yes.
And the more dialogue that we have, the more that we can brainstorm and come together to devise a successful plan that work in our community, which we can't rely on the police department again. And I'm gonna continue beating them up because of the fact they not helping the people nor the community, citizens, or neighborhood. So that's my intake of it.
I agree 100%, Comrade Sister. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
We're on almost 3 hours before we close. Again,
Oh, God.
Comrade Elder High Thurman is on tour with Brother Kwame, Comrade Kwame. They'll be hitting up the East Coast. Look us up on social media. All the dates are there. There's also a GoFundMe. If any comrades who hear this want to throw a little dollars at the GoFundMe, that would greatly help Comrade Elder and Comrade Brother Kwame in their journey to spread this wonderful revolutionary gospel. Like, that's how I feel Comrade Elder's book and Comrade Brother Kwame's book is. Like, this is the gospel for the revolution, and we are the soldiers for that revolution, and we have to adhere by
I
that.
like
And so
that.
it really is. I mean, literally stuff that we were reading in High's book, we're still dealing with
Yes.
today in terms of police brutality and all that. It
He
really
got
is
the
like a
blueprint.
revolutionary gospel. It is, a blueprint.
Yeah.
He got the blueprint.
Yes. Amen. Amen.
Well, and
Thank you, brother.
again, I just want to say that I'm so grateful that we
Yes.
have Elder Comrade Hi and Elder Comrade Andy to be there for us and to guide us, because I
Yes.
think without their knowledge and experience, this would be a lot tougher road to take.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It would not be any kind of structure, or we cannot have that great voice of wisdom based on their experience on
Yes.
how we can carry the torch and pass it on. So yes, I am so grateful and appreciative of the both
Yeah.
of y'all.
Well, you'll
And-
buy me a
About
beer
that.
sometime.
And Capitan
Hi.
Lobo, I think you are going to be a fantastic chairman, sir. And
Oh, yeah.
I am very happy with that decision.
Yeah.
Gracias, hermana, gracias. The ancestors speak through me, and as long as we have, Comrade Elder High Thurman and Andy and others, I think that's all we need is listen to the elders, make things come to fruition, bring ideas to the table at some of these meetings, like a list of resources, the website, and then just work together, and then also too, like conferences locally, nationally, and then come together and with this revolutionary gospel, start coming to it, start preaching it, spreading that good word, man.
My only suggestion for a conference would be that we come up with some other name than the Second Rainbow Coalition Conference, because if we call it that, it is going to be nasty, stinky with cops
True.
and people watching. We're going to have to come up with a better name for it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And not only that, but also do it locally and nationally. Like on a national level, I would love for all of us to come underneath one roof, break some bread, have some song and dance, and then do some revolutionary work, like build that whole list of resources, whatever. But also too, locally, like I really haven't really met Olive Garden Rebellion from Seattle. I met Cadden, but that was in passing at Comrade High Thurman's book, and then she and I had to jump into action because somebody got shot. Like, hi, nice to meet you. You got an IFAC? Like,
Yeah.
You got an IFAC.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Whoa.
crazy. That was crazy. I heard about that like the night it happened. You know, she was messaging me going, "You're not gonna believe what happened."
Well, you know, before we close, it was funny because I'm shooting pool with Kwame, and he was like, "What was that fireworks?" And I already knew. I was like, "No, brother, no, it's not fireworks." And by the time we head out there, Comrade High Thurman was already out there. I was like, "Damn, he
Right?
beat me out there!" Like what?
Right.
Oh, wow.
Well, you know, we're lucky to know those people that go toward that instead of away from it. You know?
Exactly,
Oh, yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but all power to the people. I love
All
all
power
of
to
you,
people.
and
Love
Oh,
y'all.
so glad
Okay,
to
you want
be
me to count
affiliated
down?
with all of you.
Yeah, yeah. You count down,
Okay,
sister, and then we'll do an all power to the people, and then we can leave, and I'll end the meeting. How about that?
okay, I
Yeah.
appreciate everybody. So I'm gonna count down on 5 and we're gonna sign off. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Black power.
All
All
power
power
to the
to the
Good.
people.
people.
All right.
All right. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
thanks.
You too.
All right. Bye bye.